This is the very first time that TTF has ever done anything in relation to World Values Day, so we're actually quite excited by it, and we're very keen that next year we'll have an even better, even bigger event. But it's really great that all of you have decided to spend some time with us today to celebrate this day and to talk about the topic of values, which, as we all know, is such an important issue within the financial services sector. Now, because we have so many of you, we need to keep these introductions as quickly and as succinct as possible. So all we really need to know is who you are, your organisation, what you do, and where you are as well, because one or two of you are outside the UK, and it would be good for everybody else to know. So we're going to go in this order to begin with. We're going to go to Scott, then Anne-Marie, then Ben, then Steve Hubbard, Andy Aitkenhead, then Kim Schweizer, and then I'll give another group after that. So Mr. Scott Housley, please unmute yourself and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do. Scott, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Scott Housley. I live in the north of England, in the beautiful North Yorkshire County, and it's not raining. I'm basically retired. I stopped full-time working about 5 years ago, most of the time in financial services. I've been doing 1 or 2 jobs since then, and I was introduced to the Transparency Task Force and to Andy about 2 weeks ago, I think. Yes. So I'm a fairly newcomer to the task force. I have a passionate belief in what you are doing with TTF.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott. And I'll quickly mention to everybody that Scott has very, very kindly volunteered to lead a brand new TTF initiative. Scott is the head of our Retired Professionals project. We're reaching out to retired people who've left the financial services sector and who, on reflection, would like to put something back after having retired. So if you know anybody that's retired from financial services, then Scott's your man. Scott, I invite you please to put your contact details into the chat, and of course I invite everybody else to do the same as well. We are going to be quite short for time, so please everybody, as succinctly as you can. We're now going to go to Anne-Marie, then to Ben. Anne-Marie, over to you.
Hi everybody, I'm in London and I'm half French, half Swedish, and I have created and founded a project called the Antara Project, which means from the heart. And it deals essentially with education, the environment, but a lot of other things as well. So I'm also an ambassador for the TTF. I have a PhD in international law, and I'm also a musician, a composer, an artist, and a coach. So that's about it. Ocean, that's about my story.
Thank you very much indeed, Anne-Marie. Lovely. Ben, if I can invite you to be even more succinct, please, Ben. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Ben Constable Maxwell. I work at M&G Investments, and I sort of lead up our impact investing efforts and have been involved in sustainability and sustainable investing for about kind of 8-9 years now. And I think the work that TTF does is super important. Transparency is a crucial part of, I think, sustainability. That's incredibly interlinked. And I think, it's all about values these days. That's great to see this initiative.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. And even more succinct from Mr. Steve Hubbard. Go for it, Steve. Thank you. You'll need to unmute first again, sir. Steve, you're you're muted once again.
Yeah. Hi there. Steve Hubbard. I'm a very keen amateur. Background in science and technology in my career. Have been a very keen amateur member of the financial stability team of the TTF, and involved in their project in terms of looking at macroeconomics and the future with people like Steve Keen and so on. Thank you. I'm in the UK as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. Lovely. Mr. Andy Aitkenhead, and then we'll go to Kim, then Peter Lewis, then Jacqueline. Andy.
Yes, Andy Aitkenhead. Actually, I'm actually just outside Cambridge in the UK. We focus on, I would say, performance of individuals and people with the aim of ensuring change is sustained. I'll speak more about it a bit later on.
Perfect, Andy. That's nice and succinct, just like how we want it. Thank you. Kim, to you, please.
Hi all, I'm Kim Schweitzer. I'm in London, founder of an organization called Time for Change London. And we help companies attract and retain employees by fostering a workplace that employees can be proud of. Talk a little bit about that later. And thanks for Andy for inviting me tonight.
You're most welcome, Kim. Thank you. Peter, please say hello. You're on mute, Peter. There we go. Perfect.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, it's slow on the fingers. Yeah, tonight I'm wearing my Principled Consulting hat. Principled Consulting does what it says on the tin. It's all about principles, values-based decision making. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit later, so I won't waste a lot of time now. I also am a co-director and founder of an organisation called the Risk Coalition, which some of you would have heard about previously, and a supporter of Andy's, based in London.
Cheers, Peter. Perfect stuff. We're going to go Jacqueline, then Rebecca, Maggie, Rory, Alan, Jason. Jacqueline.
Hi, thanks, Andy. Jacqueline Hill, leadership coach and change mentor for people who are working to make the world a better place, and increasingly activist around lots of different areas, hence the link to TTF. And I'm based in East Surrey in England.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Perfect stuff. Rebecca.
Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Self. I work for South Pole, where I'm the Director for Sustainable Finance, which means working with the financial industry on climate action. And for background, I was in the banking industry for 20 years before this. Chartered accountant, studied a master's in sustainability, and I'm speaking from the Netherlands today.
Oh, okay. Are you on holiday or working there at the minute, Rebecca?
I've moved here about 2 months ago, so I now live and work here.
Okay, lovely to know. Thank you very much, Rebecca. To Maggie.
Hi there, I'm Maggie Roger. I'm from London. My career was in the charity sector, principally the church central organisations and then a hospice, where I worked in accountancy. But since towards the end of that career, I got involved in being trustee of a pension fund, and I'm the Church of England pension fund is the one particularly at the moment. In my working career, I was involved in investing, and the church has always been very much involved in ethical investing. And now I'm involved in investing the pensions money using the church's values.
Thank you very much, Maggie. To Mr. Rory Ridley Duff. What a name. That's a lovely name you've got, sir. Rory Ridley Duff.
Thank you. I'm a professor at Sheffield Hallam University, where I work for the Fair Shares Institute for Cooperative Social Entrepreneurship. And I'm going to be speaking to you a little bit later about the work we've done to support VME, which is a provider of software to courts.
Thank you, Rory. Just to let you know, the signal wasn't great, Rory, just to let you know. Alan Williams, to you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am sitting on the UK Values Steering Group with Charles Fowler and a couple of other colleagues, and we've launched and developed World Values Day. I'm also the founder of the Global Values Alliance. And for my day job, I run Service Brand Global, which helps organizations to deliver values-driven service for sustainable performance. So making values alive and implemented.
Wonderful. And our first round of applause, and I'll show you all how we give a round of applause in the TTF style in a minute. Our first round of applause is going to go to Alan, because it was through Alan primarily that I got to know about World Values Day in the first place. If it wasn't for Alan, TTF wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't all be here having this, what will be a very constructive conversation. So this is how we give a round of applause in TTF land. We wave like we were 6. Do you remember when you were 6? You go like this, and you have to shake your head about, okay? Get in there. That's it. That's it. So that's how we do it here. Okay, thank you very much. I love giving everyone a chance to connect with their inner child. It's our inner child that needs to speak tonight. Thank you very much, Alan. Wonderful. We now go to Mr. Jason Su, who I've not known for long, but I genuinely admire this gentleman and the way that he's building his organization. Jason, please do say hello to everybody. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Su. I'm a TTF ambassador, a big fan of Andy. I'm also a professor at UCLA and founder CIO of Raylian Global Advisors, which is a investment manager focused on China and emerging markets, but more importantly, we're a new kind of investment manager who's primarily focused on being a purpose-driven organization.
Thank you very much indeed. And where exactly are you physically right now, Jason?
I just returned from Shanghai, so I'm back in Boston right now.
You're back in Boston. Thank goodness for that. I was worried you were up in the middle of your night. I'm really pleased you're back in Boston. Great stuff. Thank you. Mr. Eric Smith, lovely to see you again, as always, sir.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be with you. I am in Michigan in the US, and it is raining here. So I am the chairman and CEO of Decision Technologies Corporation and Trustee Empowerment and Protection. Briefly, what we're doing is looking to empower individual investors of all types, and we think that may be the best route to hold the industry accountable and fundamentally change things for the better. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Eric. Great to have you with us. Mr. David Masters, it's been a few months since I've seen you. Please say hello to everybody.
Hi, yeah, good to see you, Andy. It has been a little while. David Masters, I'm a partner with Lansons. We help companies manage their reputation. I'm also involved with the Transparency Task Force as an advisor and an ambassador.
Thank you, David. Great to have you with us. And now we go to Jim. Please say hello, Jim. Then we're going to go to Daryl, then Brenda, then Jill.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Glennon. This is my maiden voyage with the Transparency Task Force. I have had intended enlisting actively much sooner, but unfortunately illness intervened. I'm now getting back on my feet. I'm looking forward to participating. I'm currently chairman of Edelman Dublin, and also a company called Medisec Ireland, which provides professional indemnity cover for doctors. I'm a former national politician, and my interest is born out of the requirement, in my view, for a total recalibration of our political systems in relation to the financial world.
Jim, I can't begin to tell you how pleased I am to see you're with us this evening and that you're getting better. It's wonderful to have you. Everybody that knows me and the Transparency Task Force well knows that I talk about the Edelman Trust Barometer probably on a daily basis. That's no exaggeration, I really do. So it's wonderful, Jim, that you're here with us this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andy.
Damn fine rugby player in his day as well too, sir. Mr. Daryl Claret, please say hello. Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Daryl. I'm a partner at Axelate along with Andy, which is one of the guest speakers. I'm doing a lot of work on operating model re-engineering at the moment around purpose and values. So looking at an operating model from a variety of different lenses where sustainability, employee well-being, diversity and wider stakeholder engagement is key. And that's enough.
Daryl, that's perfect. Thank you. We're going to go to Brenda, then to finally go to Chris. Brenda, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late and apologies in advance. Something's come up, so I'll be dipping in and out over the next 2 hours. I hope you don't mind. I've worked in the city, financial markets, and then taken risk management to a large corporate, and there got into sustainability. And it looks like I'll be doing my second stint in public sector starting next week in a commercial services, hoping to do good work while actually making it, doing it at a good price as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Brenda. And last but of course not least, to Chris. Chris, please say hello. Thank you. We can't hear you, Chris. Oh. No, I think there must be a problem with your mic, Chris. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to crack on, see if you can resolve the situation, and we'll come back to you later, okay? Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to start this off with the word purpose. Everything we do needs to have a purpose to it. Of course, it would be a pleasant conversation this evening if all we do is talk about values and the importance of values. But I thought to myself, you know what? Wouldn't it be good if we could actually think about something practical we could achieve this evening? So I'm going to attempt to do that. I'm going to attempt to enable everybody to come away from this gathering with a very simple idea that could actually be quite useful for us as individuals. And of course, if we were to encourage everybody else to do the same, could actually have meaningful change. And here's what we're going to do. In a moment, you're going to be listening to and watching a video from Charles Fowler, who, as Alan mentioned earlier, kind of helped get this whole World Values Day idea up and running. Now, during that session, I'd like you to think about this. I'd like you to think about the 5 values, okay, the 5 values that you individually believe that you possess. You know, what are the 5 values or characteristics of you as a person that you identify with, that you think to be important, that you believe is a part of you? Now, there's no right and wrong here. No one's going to be comparing notes about whose values they are. But later on, after we've heard from Charles, we're going to invite everybody to put the 5 values that you most identify with in the chat, okay? These aren't necessarily the 5 values that describe you, but they are the 5 values that you hold to be very important and that you feel you can relate to and identify with. There's no right, there's no wrong. Whatever they are what they are. But then what I want you to do, and this is the important bit, is to think about the one value that you believe is a key improvable. A trainer would describe it as a key improvable. The one value that you don't think is strong enough or good enough compared to what you would like it to be. And I'm going to share with you mine now, just to give you a feel for this. And I asked my wife, I said to my wife, Sue, not long ago, I said, Sue, what would be the one value that you wished I would be better at or stronger at or more in tune with? And she immediately said, tolerance. And I thought, tolerance? What? As you do. And I thought, actually, she's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I, as a human being, need to be far, far more tolerant. And those of you that may know me quite well might be able to identify with that. So for me, tolerance is the one. So I'm kind of saying to myself, what if we approach this in a similar way to how we do things on New Year's Day? You know, it's New Year's Day. You're thinking to yourself, okay, this year I'm going to do this, this, and this. We have our kind of, you know, our New Year's Day promises, our New Year's Day aspirations. What if everybody today came away with that one idea, that one value that between now and next year's World Values Day, we tried to think about? Okay, and hopefully that will mean that, as well as some very interesting conversations this evening and interesting presentations, we'll all come away with something quite meaningful. So please prepare to share in the chat. Don't do it now, but prepare to share in the chat the 5 values that you really kind of strongly identify with, and the one value that you feel is a key improvable, if you get my general gist. Does anybody have any questions about that little exercise before we move on? Everyone seems hunky-dory. Scott's got a question. Scott, please unmute yourself and share your thought. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, I need to leave early, I'm afraid.
That's okay.
So I will post my 5 values and send them out as a chat, if that's okay.
Of course you can. Of course you can, Scott. That's absolutely fine. Thank you. All right.
My apologies.
That's okay, Scott. We do understand. So I'm now going to try and find the video that's been specially prepared by Mr. Charles Fowler, who is essentially the engine behind this work, this initiative, working with a great team of people. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to press play, and hopefully this is all going to work. It's about 6 minutes, so please do allow yourself to absorb the message that Charles is giving across here. It's an important message.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for inviting me here, and good evening, everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm intensely happy to be speaking today about World Values Day. And thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this event and celebrating World Values Day with the rest of us around the world. It's been a tremendous experience, World Values Day. We started 5 years ago, and from a standing start, we've grown to reach over 30 million people around the world. It's been fantastic, and this year, hopefully, we're going to do even better and get the figure up quite a lot beyond that. The activities, just to tell you a little bit about World Values Day, what do we do? The activities are all kinds, really. They range from big events and conferences right down to countless small acts of humanity by individuals around the world. And this is happening in every country, in every region, really, from North America, South America, right through the European time zones, right through Asia, Africa, Australasia, everywhere people are joining in. It's not just the English-speaking countries that are joining in, it's really spread far beyond that. We get countries like Albania, Bulgaria, a lot of Middle Eastern countries, a lot of, Turkey is very big. I mean, there are a lot of countries which you wouldn't think would necessarily have picked up on it because of the language issue, not because they don't have a tremendous focus on values and a tremendous awareness of values, of the need for values. A lot of organizations use World Values Day to take stock of their values. And they ask themselves questions like, you know, how are we really living our values every day? What actions can we take? What choices, what different choices can we make to put our values into action to make a difference in the way that we behave in our organization? And this is a really valuable time for this sort of navel gazing, and very valuable navel gazing for all of us. And that's really the value of World Values, I think, both for groups and for organizations and for individuals. This year, World Values Day is going to look quite a lot different because it's going to be, for obvious reasons, online pretty much entirely. And really because of that, we've launched something quite new, and we've launched a Values Zone, which is a 24-hour rolling series of events, back-to-back events, and side-by-side a lot of the time, starting in Australia in the morning, finishing in California in the Californian evening. And they're dealing with all sorts of different sorts of topics, values in different contexts, values in the financial services, like this event, but also values in relating to health, welfare, values in organizations, values for individuals, values for personal development, values in cookery, values in nutrition, all sorts of areas which, you know, there's no area where values and understanding our values and acting in accordance with our values isn't absolutely essential. The theme this year is values in action, and really the big question that comes up as we pursue that theme is, well, why is it that we're not putting our values into action? If we were, you know, we'd be living in a totally different world, or if you like, a totally different organization or group or society. We're not putting our values into action. And why is it? Is it because of thoughtlessness? Well, maybe because we tend to forget our values. Is it because of complacency? Yeah, sure, we're quite complacent about our values. But is it because of, you know, perhaps deeper issues? There's a lot of cynicism. Is it cynicism about values? And we all know organizations where they have bright, shiny values in their bright, shiny report and accounts, and they trumpet them and speak about them and say, this is what we do. And yet, when you look at the organization, you get to know them, you can see quite clearly that the real value there is, guys, we're all out for ourselves in this organization. It's just cynical. And this is the sort of thing we're trying to dig down and dig up. And, you know, I have to say it happens in financial services. I'm a former financial services veteran, you could say, over 30 years in fund management. And I know in that area in financial services generally how many issues there are to do with values and ethics. And I think, you know, TTF is doing an absolutely fantastic job in digging around here, making people conscious of things that are wrong, things that are not happening as they should. And if we could get that approach that TTF has in the financial services sector, in other sectors, there's so many of them that could do with this sort of, you know, investigative, probing, debating body to throw up and highlight what's going on there, what isn't going on very well there sometimes. And it can be done sector by sector, organization by organization, individual by individual. We can change sectors, we can change, you know, change our whole society. It's ambitious, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing it. So Thank you very much, Andy, for inviting me. Thank you for having me, and have a fantastic World Values Day. And, you know, if you can, you know, post and tweet and join the action on social media, have a look what's going on elsewhere, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Use the hashtag World Values Day, and you're off. So thank you very much. It's been a tremendous pleasure. Have a very, very good evening. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed. Well done, Charles. That was great. That was really, really great. So our second round of applause is, of course, for Charles. Go for it. Don't hold back. Get in the vibe. Go for it. Thank you very, very much. I can see one of two of you aren't quite there yet, but you will be by the end of the evening. You will be by the end of the evening. Fantastic. Lovely. Okay, very clear message. My colleague Alexandra, who's behind the TTF shield. We have the shield as our logo because we're all about the idea of protecting the consumer from harm, hence the shield. So Alexandra's going to pop the hashtag and the tweeter thingy into the chat so everybody knows what to tweet. And please do go mad on social media today. Let everybody know your involvement with World Values Day. Okay, before we go to our next speaker, I'm going to share a picture with you. So here we go. This picture is, you'll all recognize that, I know, okay? So you will all recognize that. Of course, it's the Wizard of Oz. Would anybody like to hazard a guess why on earth I'm showing you a picture of the Wizard of Oz? Any stabs at that? Just shout out if you obviously unmute yourselves first. Anybody like to suggest why I'm showing a picture of the Wizard of Oz?
Because
values.
Go on, Kim.
No, I just said values.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Anybody else would like to add to that?
The speaker's the Tin Man.
You speak as the Tin Man. Okay. So the story of the Wizard of Oz is each of the characters was looking for something. Yeah, they were looking for a quality or a value. And that's our message this evening. Let's all identify the one thing that is not quite strong within our own personal values chemistry or values makeup or values profile, whatever you want to call it, in exactly the same way that the characters in The Wizard of Oz went out hunting for what it was that they would think would make them a more complete person, a more complete individual. And what I'm going to invite everybody to do now is to quite literally just whack into the chat. Everything that goes into the chat is going to be circulated. So what are your 5 strengths, if you like, if that's the right word? It probably isn't, but you know what I'm trying to say. What are the 5 things that are your sort of characters that you identify with, and then make it very clear which is the one value that between now and next year's Values Day you're going to try to do something to make stronger. Okay, so everybody, please do share this. Everyone get in the vibe. We'll get this wrapped up in under a minute, I'm sure. Make it clear which is the one that you want to work on. Integrity, transparency. To work on. Now and next year's VD. Great stuff. Okay. Hey, I can see the word transparency is coming up a fair bit here, which is great. We'll give it a bit longer, make sure everyone's had a chance to do so. Oh, look, we've got loads of great content here. Loads of great content. Just wave at me if you need any more time. Does anybody need a bit more time, or shall we quickly move on? Anne-Marie and Kim need a bit more time. We'll give them a bit more time. One of our values is patience. See, it works. I think they're all coming through now. Oh, this is great. Okay. I think we're going to move on now to our first speaker. So we're now going to go to Mr. Andy Aitkenhead. We can reflect on what's in the chat in a minute. So Mr. Andy Aitkenhead, can you please unmute yourself and share with us your thoughts, please? It'll be lovely to hear from you. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, everybody, hello. And you haven't seen my 5 on there because I was holding back because you're going to hear them. So Andy said to me a few weeks ago, he said, you're always talking about purpose. Maybe you could talk at our values day. So here I am. And so what I'm going to talk about, and I hope, Peter, this doesn't sort of cross over what you're going to talk about. I did ask Alexandra a few days ago, and I think you and somebody else and Rory were the only people she had a subject for. So, but I want to talk about aligning our values with our purpose. Okay, and in a sense, some values are relative and some are not. But I want to talk about it in the context of some of the work we do, because when we're looking at the purpose of individuals and organisations, we're talking about effectively aligning those things for better performance. So in a sense, my purpose for the last, I don't know how many years, certainly 20 years, if not more, has been all around improving the performance of individuals and organizations, mostly in the context of change. So our strapline is about ensuring sustainable change. I'm not trying to sell what we do. I just want to talk about some of these things because you'll recognize, I think, that some of the themes come out constantly in the things that we, that you see. And in doing that, what we want to do in a sense is to improve the capability and the capacity of the people we work with. And that includes actually ensuring that that's aligned with their own values. And obviously, in sort of thinking through my purpose, our purpose, and I've talked to Daryl. Daryl, I think, has probably got fed up with me sort of hammering away at, what's your purpose? Which, ensuring that we're aligned with those things. That, I kind of look at what our values are that underline that. I know Daryl's put some in the box, but I kind of put mine in this order. So honesty. And I'll tell you, so our approach is a coaching approach, and there is quite a well-known coach I know well. And one of the stories he told me was that he was actually asked to coach a famous, the senior people at a famous auction house. And what he discovered, that the auction business, and Daryl's had experience of this as well, is not a transparent business. And consequently, at the top level, there is a lack of honesty. It's an opaque business. And his integrity was such that he actually walked away. So he sort of said, basically, if you cannot be honest and transparent with me, I can't coach you. So honesty is critical. And obviously, along with that goes integrity. Curiosity is one of the things I'd say for years. I've always been curious about how people learn, but also what are the obstacles to how we perform. So I think Galway in the game of tennis talks about performance is potential minus interference. So what's the interference in a sense? And then always about somebody put courage in. I wasn't. That's probably one of the. That's a crisper way of thinking about. Don't be afraid to try new things. So actually work on new things. So that's behind, if you want, my purpose. And I just want you to think about it in terms of, everybody here, there's 20 odd of us. How clear are you about your purpose in what you do? So you don't have to answer, but if anybody ever wants to interrupt me, please feel free to do so. I'm quite happy with that. Just know that I'm in charge here, or probably Andy is actually. But so it's interesting. So one of the things that there's a lot of people here with coaching backgrounds or coaching expertise, and a lot of that focuses on leadership. And one of the things that I've kind of observed in recent years is that, in a sense, the corporate world is a little bit behind the sporting world in terms of bringing in what you might call performance science. So coaching's come in. I think the executive coaching business has actually taken on, Galway was a major influence on that. But actually what's happened is a lot of the other factors that have influenced sporting performance are still not being taken up into the corporate world. And actually, what we see in the corporate world, if you want, is a lot of disconnects. So I'm sure that if you asked almost every company on the planet And we actually did this in the early days of Accelerate. We actually talked to a lot of investors, because not because we wanted money, but because we thought we could help the sort of private equity VC industry accelerate the pace of, you know, realizing their return. And, you know, if you talk to all of them, you ask them what's the most important thing you look at when you're investing, they will either say the people, the team, the leadership. I haven't come across anybody who's not done that in those worlds, and that's very similar in the large corporate world. Yeah, actually, when we talk about values, where they are, if you want trade, you know, there's a trade-off between values, and I know Andy and I and lots of others have talked about the state of economics in the world and the focus, you know, post from the late 70s onwards on the primacy of shareholder value. The growing movement towards wider stakeholder measures has grounds behind it, because actually there's research to show that the firms that look at wider shareholder measures perform better. And the Maturity Institute guys have been working with some folks in Cambridge to demonstrate that. So, you know, those are important things, but are they really prioritizing, if you want, the people on the pitch as opposed to the people in the stands or the people who are investing? And the rhetoric doesn't always match the actions. And I think we've also got to be honest with ourselves, because actually I want to tell you two stories about two different organizations. I'm sure some of you will have heard these stories, but we see the world through our own eyes, and it's very easy to have this sort of filter, this confirmation filter, where we look at it and you'll say, you recognize the firm that you all want to align with, but do you really, or do I really? And the two organizations, one is called Bird Scooters. I don't know if anybody's heard of Bird Scooters. I'm sure Jason probably has. Bird Scooters, an American firm that make electric scooters. They're not that old, but they're one of the sort of growth seeming success stories, or were, probably still are. And I haven't followed their progress very much of late. The other firm is an older established firm going back to the late 19th century, a firm who you'll all know the name of, Victorinox, who makes Swiss Army knives, right? So Bird Scooters, and I'll try and précis this story a little bit. So Bird Scooters, October last year, they had a Series D funding, I think of $275 million. I think the valuation at the time was $2.5 billion. So they're, you know, seemingly doing well. They've got their scooters in cities all around the world, and COVID comes, right? So one of my questions to you, just to think about in the background, is, you know, you might be clear about your values. Has COVID highlighted, altered, amended them? Just have a think about that for later on, because I'd like to get opinions at the end of this. But anyway, Bird Scooters, COVID comes along, and on the 27th of March, 400 plus employees of Bird Scooters get an invite to a meeting, a Zoom meeting, and the Zoom meeting lasted 2 minutes. It was a 2-minute, the PA of the CEO and the 400 odd, I think it's 406 employees, or at least the ones that could get on the call, were laid off. Immediately, a script was run to cut them off their technology. And in fact, the PA, I believe, was actually let go not long after she made the announcement. And the whole reason behind that supposedly was for the founders, the owners of the company, or the management, was supposedly to give them more runway because of the uncertainty. And sure, there was a bit of a dip, but actually the demand for scooters has gone up since then. So it's interesting to see what's happened. So, you know, what's the level of care for their employees in that respect, in that context? The other story, Victorinox. So Victorinox, founded in 1884 in Switzerland. They obviously make Swiss Army knives. The person who founded it actually did it in response to economic challenges at the time, to give employment to the people in that area, a place called Ipsac. 9/11 came. And of course, most of their, they sold a lot of product through airline gift shops. a lot of their product was given as corporate gifts. And between 9/11 and the first quarter of 2002, their revenue dropped 30%. They laid nobody off. And what they did was they actually, they stopped hiring, they cut overtime, but they actually also farmed out employees, because there is a value not just in furlough in a sense, but in occupation. And they farmed out employees to local firms and continued to pay their wages. And they used the time over the next year or two to look at how they could change their business, which is what led to working with their employees, what led to luggage, cookware, fragrances, watches, and they've just grown and grown. And they have incredible employee retention, incredible employee loyalty. And the question is then, what would you, where would you put your money in a sense? And is your heart there? Just think about that. And there are, and it's, there's a couple of guys, I'm sure most of you have heard of Kouzes and Posner, who've written a book called The Leadership Challenge, and it's based upon research that's been done over 35 years. They do a continual survey of why people follow leaders. Pardon? Somebody speak? Anyway, so they do a survey, and the top reason every year, there's 4 reasons that have been consistent. But the top one is honesty, or people do what they say they will do. They walk the talk, whatever it is. Effectively, they are authentic. That's their credibility, and it's what keeps people behind them. And I think that's critical to us. If we are, it's not just about having these values, but it's about actually walking the walk, and actually doing what we say we'll do. I've got loads more I could say. I think it's probably I don't like just carrying on talking.
That's great. That's been great, Andy.
I'd be interested to know, I'd be interested to know people's experience with, their own purpose, how they've, the challenges they've faced. I've got loads of examples of people I know who faced challenges to their integrity and the way they've handled it. And I'm sure I spent the first 10 years of my career as a trader, in the 80s. My word was my bond. And it's interesting how many people, it worked in many ways, but it also didn't work with some people. So, it's interesting to hear people's experience.
Andy,
I'll step back at that point.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. I think you've got the show off onto exactly the right kind of start. So thank you very much indeed for doing that for us, Andy. That's been very interesting indeed. Does anybody have anything that they would like to say? And once we've got that piece of the programme dealt with, we'll invite Jill Cardy, Debbie Henderson and Chris Bullock to briefly introduce themselves as they've not yet had a chance to do so. But first of all, are there any quick questions or comments for Andy in response to what he said? I can see Mr. Eric Smith with that lovely deep American accent is going to be speaking now. Eric, over to you. You're on mute. You're on mute, Eric.
Just one thing that came quickly to mind in listening with Andy is that what I've noticed in my years of experience is that you can take teams through very rough times, but you have to be there with the team. You have to take the first bullet. If there is a cutback, you have to be involved in the cutback to a greater extent than those who are around you that you're asking to go through this hard time with you. That's been my personal experience, and I think it's consistent with what Andy's illustrations were.
So, really well made point. Thank you very much indeed, Eric. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to share? In which case, we're going to, guess what? We're going to say thank you to Andy Aitken. And you know how we're going to do it. We're going to go like this. Remember, be 6 just for a few seconds. Just be 6. Remember when you were 6. What those lovely days. Thank you very much, Andy. Bravo. Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to hear from Chris Bullock, if we can get his sound sorted out, then Debbie, then Jill. Chris, please say hello. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly well, sir. Yes.
Fantastic. I must admit, I'm not keen on doing any public speaking, so I always get nervous, so just to let you know. basically, it's nice to join you all. It's the first time for me. My background is quite varied, actually, over 40 years, but the relevance is 14 years in finance, including 2 years headhunting to create wealth management teams. I've had a structured finance business as well. I've just completed an EMBA where my dissertation was focused on ESG benchmarking in alignment with the Paris Accord. It brought up a lot of very interesting findings, and I'm now doing some research with the potential to go on to do a PhD. And my keen interest really is sustainability. And I love that word transparency, if only that was in human nature.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. I get the message completely loud and clear. Thank you for being with us, Chris. Deborah Henderson, please introduce yourself. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Andy. Sorry to be had earlier conflicts. I am Canadian, a former investment banker, 16 years in the last 20 plus years as a leadership coach consultant, focusing on creating healthy cultures with organizations, and every coaching assignment for an individual leader, their team or their organization is done on a measuring their values. As it turns out, it's a shout out for the Richard Barrett Value Center model for measuring the intangible, and I love it, and feel this type of conversation is hugely important. Andy, thank you for your stories. I just think they're amazing. And Eric, to your comment, I love the book by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last, as the sort of indication of what it is we're talking about right now. And Jason, wonderful to see you and know your role modeling that you're offering to the world. So thank you for your organization.
Thank you, Debbie. That's wonderful. And Debbie has been doing a wonderful job helping TTF with a major project we've got on the go, which is about getting to understand how particularly ethical leaders operate within the financial services sector. And I've had the privilege of being with Debbie when she's been doing these interviews. And one of the interviewees was Jason, who's with us tonight. And Jason's going to be speaking later. Thank you very much indeed, Debbie. Wonderful to have you with us tonight. And let's now go to Jill. Jill, if you can, unmute yourself and tell us all a little bit about yourself. Nice to have you with us. It's been a while, Jill. Thank you. Jill, the sound's coming across really badly. We can't really hear you, so I'm going to have to move on. But please, if the opportunity arises later, please introduce yourself. And as Debbie just indicated, why don't you introduce yourself in the chat? That would be a great thing to do. We're now going to go to Peter Neverlook. I've known Peter for a few years. Peter, we can only just about see you, so if you can do something to make yourself a little bit better lit, that's much better. Thank you very much. And let's now go to Peter. Over to you, Peter. If we can keep to time, less than 10 minutes would be great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Right, I will do my best. I've got some slides to share, which is always boring, but hopefully not too boring, just to make some points. So quickly pull up if I can, screen share, but of course the slides have now disappeared. Let's have a look and see. That should be working for everybody, I hope.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Good, okay. So let's get that on to, there we go. Is that working? Is that good for everybody?
It's good, Peter, thank you.
Right, super. Now the only thing is I need my next slide. So the first thing I want to say is we're talking about values today, and of course values are a very, very tricky word. They mean different things to different people. And I think a lot of the time the problem with values is the word has got corrupted in the last 20, 30, maybe 100 years or more, who knows. We used to talk about virtues. Nobody really talks about virtues any longer. But if you go back to the great philosophers, people like Aristotle and Plato, you'll find that's what they were talking about. They were talking about moral virtues. And for me, when we're talking about values, this is what it's about. It's moral virtues, because when they get taken up by organizations, what I call corporate values, they morph into slightly different things. We'll come to that in just a minute. But of course, it has to be at the heart of every organization's culture. And I'll dig into that in a minute, because a lot of people don't always understand what culture is. And executives frequently say, oh, it's too difficult. We can't measure culture. We don't know what it's impossible. absolute rubbish. It's not, that is complete nonsense. It's perfectly possible to measure culture if you look at the next point I'm making there, which is not simply behaviours. It's just how a group of people behave. That's what culture is. We all have individual behaviours which are based on decisions that we make and then take, and those in turn need to be based on values, of course. But the point that's been made over and over again, of course, is that if you get this right, if you can really get your culture right, and I would pick on one organisation who I think over the last 80 odd years have got it pretty right, the John Lewis Partnership, or Waitrose. Everybody will be familiar with them. They have always had an excellent culture about doing the right thing for their people. That is absolutely fundamental. Happiness and enjoyment and worthwhile employment of all their partners, as they call them, is absolutely the prime focus and purpose of the organisation. Getting that right enables you to have the sort of business reputation and culture which they have enjoyed for a very, very long time, and still do, despite all the difficulties that the high street and the grocery industry is facing at the moment. Culture equals values. So what do I mean by that? They said, well, behaviours, culture is how a group of people decide to behave. That's what it is. You see people doing things. Well, the reason they do things is because they've decided that they want to behave or do certain things. I know what you're going to do. I think I can see what's going on here. It is evident to us in how other people behave and act. But that, of course, is based on a decision. We decide to do something. That's what the decisions are about. We think about it first, hopefully. We make a decision, and then we take a decision. Again, something which isn't always fully understood in organizations. The making and taking are two very separate things. Very often that gets conflated into taking decisions. Yes, we're very good at decisioning, organizations say. What they mean is they're actually quite good at taking and executing decisions which have been made by one or two people, without due reference to a lot of other people and all the other stakeholders involved, and very often not even attached to any values. Going further back, because they're sort of pulling the onion skin apart, why do we make decisions? Well, we make a judgment, don't we? We stop and think, hopefully, about what we actually want to do. And each of us will make different judgments about different situations because we have what we call character. We all have a different emotional, physical, moral basis from which we operate. But the thing that sits right at the bottom of the pile are the values, the core basic values, which have been around in society for thousands and thousands of years. Now, one of the words that is frequently used is, of course, integrity. It derives from the Latin word integritas, which means whole or complete. So when later writers like Cicero, the Roman writer in the first century, was built about integrity, what he meant was all that stuff that Aristotle and Plato and people were all about, the sum total of what? Moral values. And here they are set out below. There are four of them which are as old as the hills. What they're known as the cardinal virtues, the first four. We've got fortitude. These are the old words: fortitude, justice, temperance, prudence. Well, fortitude is courage, simple as that, physical and moral. Justice is fairness, how we treat people. Temperance, the old-fashioned word, remember we used to have temperance societies to keep people off the bottle, is about self-discipline, managing yourself and your desires. The opposite, of course, of which is greed. And wisdom or prudence in its original form. Prudence from the Latin word providens, to look forward. Pro, forward, video, I look. So if you are providential, prudence, you're looking forward. What's coming around the corner? What's over the hill? These are important building blocks in how we make decisions. Then the next three, very simple ones, you've all heard them because you've all been, well, hopefully most of you will have been to church and attended the odd wedding, whichever religion you are, and heard this reading, the famous one from Paul, Corinthians. He talks about faith, hope, and charity. And the greatest of these is charity. Charity comes from the Greek word charis, which means is grace. We get charisma from that. again, I've put the 20th century versions. Faith, more about trust, perhaps. Hope is what we believe in. And charity is that huge word: love, care, empathy, compassion. If we are caring people, if we genuinely have a lot of care, we call ourselves careful. If we lack in care, very simple, we become careless. And we see that only too often. And there are three more here, which I think are very important. And I've noticed them popping up already in the sidebars, people's wishes. Honesty, of course. Humility, the ability to listen to others, to respect others, etc., etc. Without that, you become hubristic and arrogant. And excellence. Always shoot for the very best that you can. So here is if you like, a bundle of core virtues or values, moral values, which all go under this one word of integrity. Are we actually acting with integrity? Now, I have done any number of sessions with organizations, and one of the things I like to do sometimes, just a little exercise to break things up, is to say, look, let's just think of a decision that you took, either as a team, or even as an individual, but ideally as a team, even as an organization. Let's just think about it and say, did we act with integrity? And frequently, of course, I have to remind them, that is one of the core values that they espouse as an organization. They've got it there, integrity, very often, but I can tell you, a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell you what it really, really means. But I say here, let's just break it down to these 10 values or virtues. When you made this decision, when the organization did, how well did they actually exemplify these 10 values? And score them out of 10. Don't give them a few minutes just to do that. And the highest score I've ever had, I promise you this, is 65. I've even had minus scores on some of these, and you look at them and say, well, what's that about? And they say, well, actually, fairness, well, I think we actually legged the customer over on this one if it's in FS. They might have been talking about PPI or something like that. So big old word, integrity. Are corporate values different? So I ask a question, is innovation a value? I've never found the word innovation in any philosopher's work in the last 5,000 years. It does not exist there. Innovation is a result of seeking excellence, of being courageous enough to try stuff out, of being humble, showing enough humility to listen to other people, accept that somebody else's ideas might be better, etc., etc. Is teamwork a value as such? No, it's not. It's the outcome of a number of other things, but these in corporate terms are called corporate values, but they're not really. They actually are desired outcomes. And very often they get disaggregated from the true human values or moral virtues which sit underneath those. And you can look at lots and lots of value statements and lists of corporate values, which very often have been put together either by senior management or possibly even an outside organization. And I would pick holes in quite a lot of them because they are not true values, and they can very easily skew the way people think they're supposed to behave. Debbie mentioned Richard Barrett's work, which I know very well. I have a little tool that I use called Moral DNA. The address is on the bottom there, moraldna.org. If anybody wants to actually look at their own 10, how they score their moral values, and also look at 3 ethical consciences, which we use very much for decision making. Moral DNA will do that. It takes you 10 to 12 minutes online. You've got a very nice little personal moral profile. And if you just do it yourself as an individual, it won't cost you a penny. We do, however, charge. We get a bit commercial when we're working with organizations, because we have to do a bit more work to aggregate it all. But the 3 ethical consciences are interesting because values underpin, the decision-making process that we go through. And there is the ethic of obedience. Do we follow the rules? Do we follow the letter of the law? Do we follow the principles, etc., the customs in an organization? Do we use our reason, our wisdom, our experience, our emotions, our logic? That's very often the balancing factor. And then we get in the middle, sitting in the middle, holding the balance, if you like, the glue between it all is our old friend care, love, empathy, etc. And very much decision making is about caring about the outcomes of what you are proposing to do and who it is going to affect. Have you actually thought about all the stakeholders? And again, whenever I do these exercises with organizations, every single time people make decisions and then propose to take decisions without even making a list of all the people who are going to be affected by them. And of course, it's very difficult to make difficult decisions without inevitably upsetting somebody. So you're never going to be perfect, but you better know who you're going to upset and who you need to square things with, rather than just plowing on. So ethical decision making is about doing what's right. How do we know? We all talk about doing the right thing. Well, we came up with a little mnemonic, right, R-I-G-H-T. But what are the rules? You do actually need to know that, although I've, if you like, slightly dissed rules. Of course, if you're driving a car and other people are on the roads, it helps to have traffic lights. Interestingly enough, when they take the traffic lights away, or when they remove pedestrian crossings, as they've done in Sloane Square, or outside all the museums between South Kensington and the Albert Hall, there's no street furniture at all. There has not been one accident there. Why? Because people have to take more care. If the rules aren't there, you have to be more careful. Really. Integrity, we talked about that. Are you actually living by and just making decisions in accordance with all the values that you aspire to or your organization does? But it should be fundamentally your personal integrity. Stakeholders, we just mentioned them. G and H, right, is good and harm. Who's this going to be good for? But who, if we haven't thought about it, might cause harm to. And very important to know that. And there you are, Andy. T is for transparency. How about that? Transparent. Be transparent. Tell the truth. We've all heard it. You don't want to see it on the headlines. You know, would you share this with your granny, etc. Blah blah blah. But it's true. We have to say, well, how did we actually do this? And is there? And frankly, from an organizational point of view, you need to have an audit trail. Because when somebody comes knocking, when the panorama investigator comes, if you're really in trouble and says, excuse me, how did this actually come about? Who made these decisions? I can tell you again from personal experience, it's very difficult to track it down. Nobody wants to own up. But increasingly, certainly in FS, the regulators are getting pretty hot on this. You better be telling the truth, and you better be transparent about it, or else you're going to come unstuck. Doing the right thing. I have 4 questions that I often ask organizations. Are we doing the right thing? Are we? Most people will say yes. Ballpark, these are big questions. So we're doing the right thing. Yes, broadly speaking, we are doing the right thing. We're trying to deliver something worthwhile. That's for the product, good value, blah, blah, blah. Are we doing it in the right way? Yeah, probably. Some things we could be doing better. But yes, overall, we're not making a bad fist of it. Are we doing it for the right reasons? Can you justify your license to operate? There are some businesses which are on the dubious side of whether we're actually doing this for the right reasons, but they're 3 pretty strong questions. And most of the time, people in business will say, yes, overall, we're not doing it right. And I say, well, that's great. Actually, that would be very good. You could put that up on the wall. We do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. Bingo, what a wonderful logo you've got there. You could even put in a business card. But is it enough? Is there something missing? I would argue that it's absolutely fundamentally, because you can do all of those things, but if they're not based on the right values, then they lack a moral basis. The end will justify the means. And that's totalitarianism in a nutshell, which is what happened in Nazi Germany. If you'd asked the average Nazi party member and supporter in 1940, 1941, are we doing the right thing in the right way for the right reasons? What do you think the boss at Auschwitz would have said? Of course, Heil Hitler. It's a dangerous route. If once you abstract moral values from your decision making, you are on a slippery slope to evil. And there are organizations that fall into that trap. So to finish off my little homily, the final decision lies within us all. It really does. It's down to us. You can talk and talk as much as you like, but at the end of the day, it's people that will make the difference. And it's people who will stand up and be counted. And I love the quote from Albert Camus, the famous French writer and philosopher: integrity, remember the sum total of all moral values, doesn't have any need of rules. If you're doing all the right things in the right way, based on the right values, you don't need a rule book to tell you what to do. We don't have one at home, I hope. We don't have a code of conduct to operate by.
Thank
so,
you.
Andy, am I done? Is that all that do?
That was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Sound bites. I just picked a lot of things. I deliberately made some of them provocative because I think it's. I want to challenge people to think. Far away. I'm here to be shot at.
Thank you. Not at all. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. You've made some very important messages very, very strongly. So we are getting a little bit tight for time, but we do have time for perhaps one or two comments or questions from anybody in the group. So please just wave at me if you'd like to make a point or ask a question at this stage. It looks like maybe everyone's good.
Stunned into silence.
Stunned into silence, as they say, Peter. Thank you very much indeed for your session. It was obviously crystal clear. We're going to, guess what we're going to do? We're going to thank Peter for his session, and we're going to do that by being 6 all over again. So go for it, everyone. Thank you very much. Don't resist the temptation. Let it happen. Just be 6. Just be 6 for a few seconds. Thank you very much. We're now going to go straight to Mr. Rory Ridley Duff. Rory, where are you? I can't see you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go for it. Rory. Thank you very much indeed. Please be to time, so less than.
Yes. Okay. So I was asked to just speak for 5 minutes and leave 5 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to try and be brief. Spend 2 minutes on the values and then 3 minutes on the values into action using an example called VME Co-op. Just got one page that I would like to show you. So it just briefly tells you about the work of the Fair Shares Institute. And it's a way of trying to be more transparent, more open by enfranchising 4 groups of people: the founders of an enterprise, the workforce, the users and the investors as members, as legal members of the enterprise. And there are 5 principles, and I want to talk about how VME has tried to put these into practice. So we investigate how organizations share power and wealth, which is why, as an institute, we're particularly interested in the cooperative model. We're interested in the purposes and the impacts that an organization brings about, and this largely comes from research into social enterprise, which has been very big on defining the purposes of your enterprise and making sure that you understand your impacts. 3 and 4 are a strong nod towards the Sustainable Development Goals, thinking very carefully about the products and services that you create. You know, not every product or service is good for people and the environment and wider society. And similarly, the way that those goods and services are produced, the way that they're sold and consumed, is also an important part of sustainable development. And then lastly, democracy was one of the values that I put into the chat when we were asking about the 5 values that we have. We're particularly interested in how you can update, improve, and move towards a more participatory democracy within the co-op movement and more generally in the workplace in place of representative models. So these are the 5 values and principles that the institute that I work for likes to investigate, and they relate to 5 values and principles that have been defined in something called the Fair Shares model. So what about VME Co-op? So VME Co-op is one of the organizations. Oh, hang on, I've got to just tell me whether can you see VME Co-op? Or is it?
Yes, we can. We can.
Yeah, right. So the story behind VME Co-op is originally the people who set up VME Co-op worked for Scott Mid Co-op in Scotland. So they were an IT group within a retail cooperative, and they decided to persuade the organization to let them do a management buyout. So it started life, this is called VME Retail Systems, as a management buyout. And once they were outside of ScotMid, they were able to update the software and begin to market and sell it to other retail co-ops. So today they service about 40% of the UK's independent co-ops. I'm not talking about the co-op group, I'm talking about central, mid-counties, southern, the other independent retailers who organise as cooperatives. And after about 10 years of this, the founder, he wanted an exit route. And he's chosen an exit route that's been promoted by, I suppose, the Employee Ownership Association in the UK, which is to organise a transfer of ownership to the workforce. But he wasn't entirely comfortable that that was the right model. So he got in touch with the Fair Shares Institute and we talked about multi-stakeholder models. So what's interesting about the web page that he's put up here is that on this page, he wanted VME Co-op, in other words, the successor to VME Retail Systems, to be owned by both the workforce and the customers. And he's put a lot of time and effort trying to persuade his customers to become members of a new co-op alongside the workforce. And the customers actually declined that opportunity. But he has now completed, on the 28th of September, they completed the process of transforming themselves into a worker cooperative, a cooperative owned by the workforce, and they will carry on writing software for the retail movement and also moving into financial services for the global cooperative movement, starting very shortly. Now, I've only got time to talk about one of those values and principles, I think, in the time that I've got. So I'm going to take the first one, which is wealth and power sharing. So the way that they have put that into practice is to, again, do something that quite a lot of employee-owned businesses do, which is to create a trust. So the trust owns 51% of the share capital in the business, and or sorry, it doesn't own 51% of the share capital, it has 51% of the voting power, and the other 49% has been given to the workforce as individual members. So there are two stakeholders. One is a collective view of the workforce as a whole as to how things should go, and then there are individuals who can go to the general meetings and they can share their individual views. And then they also have an investor class. So there is a class of share that is sold to investors who want to support the business. And so they actually have three stakeholders rather than four. The users have dropped out in effect. The employee trust is like the founder. It protects the institution, a bit like John Lewis that we were talking about earlier. It prevents it being sold out and it preserves it for the cooperative movement going into the future. The power sharing happens through an employee council. So there are 7 people elected to the employee council, and those 7 people determine how the votes, or they consult with the workforce on how the employee trust should cast its voting power. And they have to then negotiate with the board. So the board can recruit people from outside the company in order to manage itself, although they may also be elected from inside the company. But you have the board and then the employee council. And within the constitution of the company, you always have to have an agreement between the board members and the employee council members so that any protocols about wealth sharing and power sharing are agreed effectively across the workforce within the company. So I hope in the little time that I've been speaking, all I've done is whet your appetite. So you can go to fsi.coop to learn more about the Fair Shares Institute, and you can go to VME Co-op. I imagine this web page will be changing very rapidly. You know, they've converted now, so they have a big interest in getting this right. So in the time that's left, I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much indeed, Rory, for introducing us to the benefits, the advantages of a fair shares and cooperative type model. And thank you very much for respecting the time slot that you had so well. Wonderful. We do therefore have time for a bit of Q&A. So time for any comments and questions from people. Mr. Andy Aitkenhead has raised a digital hand. So Andy, straight to you, sir. Thank you.
Hi, Rory. Appreciate what you do. My son works in a Fair Shares in a cafe that has a sort of fair shares bit attached to it. So, and he loves it actually. But I'm just interested, you mentioned the VME Co-op going into the financial services world.
Yes.
How much of the financial services world is cooperative? Because clearly the co-op bank isn't.
The co-op bank was never a co-op. It was wholly owned by a co-op, but that's partly what made it vulnerable. Financial services is one of the biggest areas. I mean, I've been to the Co-op Summit, which is a group of around 3,000 people from around the world. Financial services are very well represented. So people like Nationwide are there. In other countries, often the biggest bank in the country might be a cooperative. So in France, you've got a very big co-op bank. In Netherlands, in Quebec, the biggest financial institution is called Desjardins. So there are lots of big financial and mutual organisations in the financial services world. What Steve Gill wants to do with VME Co-op is they've created a new piece of software that they believe will enable people to invest in cooperatives in the way that people might invest in the stock market into traditional private companies. There are obvious differences here because the co-op movement doesn't give investors voting power. So members of a co-op who participate in the co-op can vote. The people who only put in money don't get voting rights. But what he's hoping is that by sharing this wealth sharing, so in his own VME co-op, 49% of the surplus generated each year will go to investors and 51% will go to the workforce. And he hopes that by operationalizing principles like that, he may be able to create a global application that enables co-ops to list themselves, offering non-voting shares and raise capital for the cooperative movement. And it's been a problem that the co-op movement has faced for generations, how to raise capital.
Thank you for your question, Andy, and for your response, Rory. That was great. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say before we go to a short comfort break? I have one quick question for Rory, and I'm not expecting an answer now. Is there any hard data that basically says there is evidence suggesting that a co-op or a fair share type organisation is actually commercially more successful than one that may be run on ordinary entrepreneurial or commercial lines? Is there any sort of hard data that this? I was intrigued by what Andy Aikenhead's head said. He said that his son works in the cafe and he really loves it. I'm wondering if that loving it dimension to the dynamic of working in such an organisation translates into extra effort, people accessing more of their latent potential.
Right.
Any data around that?
Yeah, I mean, co-ops won't measure success in the same way as the traditional private sector, although they will produce information that enables you to compare their financial performance. So there is something called the World Cooperative Monitor, and that lists the 300 biggest co-ops in the world, and their turnover is I think it's dropped a little bit with all the contraction in the last few years, but it was at $2.6 trillion. It's a lot, it's a big sector.
Andy, just where my son works illustrates one of the problems. So they create quite a lot of what you call community value.
Yes.
So it's a community cafe, and they have a lot of volunteers who have addiction or mental health problems, and they support it. And part of the reason Joe loves it is he's really good at supporting and communicating with people who are.
The co-op sectors in France, Spain and Italy are much more commercially focused than the co-op sector or particularly community co-ops in the UK. Where there is definitely research evidence is on their resilience. So during the 2008 crisis, cooperative financial institutions fared much, much better than the traditional stock market listed institutions. And that was put out in a book by Johnston Birchall. But also in Quebec, in Canada, the resilience comes in survival rates. So at every age, the survival rate of co-ops is better. Their creation rate is much lower. So, they form a much smaller part of the sector. But there's a big debate about whether it's even the right thing to measure co-ops through their financial performance at all. because of the other value that Andy mentions, the other value that they create.
I think you're right, Rory, on that. I did a lot of work with the EOA a few years ago. We used moral DNA then. Yes, there is evidence there. I think it's a little bit tenuous myself, and it may well be, if you like, the employee ownership boys talking up their own business model, which I heartily applaud, but it's hardly surprising. But you're absolutely right. I think that what we do find is that people's commitment to the employee ownership model, the respect that you get, the less hierarchical sort of setups, etc., definitely contribute to greater worker satisfaction and therefore longevity of tenure, less turnover of staff, and things like that. Of course, are costs. You're reducing costs. If you can reduce the number of your staff turnover over a 10, 15, 20
yes,
years.
there was one thing I used in teaching. There's a group of co-ops, very successful, which are financially up against the corporate sector in Spain, where the average length of service in a particular co-op was 38 years. And if you think Forbes, the average length of service found by Forbes in the private sector was around 4 years.
Exactly. So I mean, there's got to be a
commitment to their organisations is phenomenal.
Knowledge and all these things, and you will of course be familiar with Handelsbanken from the FS, which is the one standout performer and has been for years. And what is the key factor there? It's longevity. And you absolutely what you say. People stay for ages there. That's partly because they don't get their bonuses until they've been there a very long time. They get
might be part of the reason.
I think it's got to call the I can't remember the name. But anyway, they've got.
I imagine Andy will want to call time on us, won't he?
Yes, absolutely. Right. You picked up on the body language there. Very, very well done, Rory. Peter, thanks for your points as well. Andy, for yours as well. Rory, huge thanks to you. We're about to go to a break, but guess what we're going to do now, folks? You know it. You know it. We're going to be 60 seconds. Go on, let go. Let yourself go. Okay, so it's 23 minutes past the hour. Can we please reconvene at 29 minutes past the hour? Okay, 29 minutes past the hour, please. So you've got 6 minutes to do what you like, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. And then a few of you want to make comments, and we'll pick up on those when we reconvene. So please reconvene at 29 minutes past. Thank you. Okay, folks, we are ready to reconvene. So I think we had one or two people that had a question or a comment they wanted to make just before we went to the break. We'll deal with those, but let me explain. We're running a little bit behind schedule. That's okay. We're going to be finishing at 8:15, and we'll be keeping the channel open till 8:30. But I do need to ask everybody to be as succinct as possible, particularly in the Q&A part. I think that Daryl had something that he wanted to share. So Daryl, are you back? I don't think Daryl's back yet, by the looks of it. In which case, we're going to go straight to Jason. So Jason, could you please take yourself on mute and share with us what you'd like to share? We're very pleased to have you with us, Jason. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone. Well, let me actually turn on my clock so I manage my clock better. So it is World Values Day. So what comes to mind? What comes to mind is, what does it mean to be a values-driven organization, particularly a investment organization? When I think about that question, I think of this comment. It is said that what you create for others is the value you bring. Now, what you charge, of course, is the price. So that's the difference between value versus price. As an industry, I think we are primarily focused on what we can charge, not what we actually provide. So I'm very much speaking for the finance industry more broadly, but certainly for the investment management industry more specifically, the industry I'm in. So let me give you an example, just around this topic of active management versus passive management. Now we know, and this has been known for 30+ years in the investment management industry, and it's supported by academic research and industry practitioner research, that a simple index fund, a simple index ETF, generally over time outperforms 90+%, we might as well call it 100%, of the actively managed funds would charge a higher fee. So it's a giant mystery, right? Why is it that our industry is filled with actively managed funds, and why is it more broadly the industry promotes actively managed funds? Now, clearly it's not a mystery, right? If you just look at how people are compensated and the fees that we can charge, we as an industry promote what is ultimately inferior, at least inferior for most of the more efficient asset classes, because we get paid more promoting actively managed funds, right? So when you think about that, what is the actual purpose reflected by our action rather than reflected by words we put on our marketing glossy? It is that our purpose as investment organizations is focused on our own take, right? Not what we deliver to our clients, right? We're focused not on the value we create, we're focused on the price we can extract. So when you think about that, now what does it mean then to be a values-driven investment organization? I think first and foremost, we've got to be honest about what our actual values are, right? Not what's written on our website, because we all know how to write down fancy words like teamwork, collaboration, value generation for clients, right? The actual values reflected by our actions are not that. We know that to be the fact. And in fact, what is worse than sort of not delivering on our values and being primarily a rent-seeking industry is that when our stated values do not equal to the actions we actually perform, what we create is for our workforce, for the young people to come to join us, we turn our young people into cynical, disillusioned people. Right? There's no greater harm that I can imagine for an organization than that outcome, right? Is it our legacy? Is it our legacy to the future generation that because of our own inauthenticity, that we're unable to face up to the fact that we take a lot more than the value we create, right? Is it our legacy to turn the next generation into disillusioned and cynical people? So we have to change. Right? Can we change the narrative of our industry from one that is both sort of dishonest and lack of self-awareness, combined with sort of general interest in rent seeking rather than value creation? Can we change that narrative to one where we could tell our young people that, give more than you can afford and simply trust that the universe will take care of the rest? Can we do that? And I think if we can do that, then there's a hope that we can be values-driven, purpose-driven organizations. And until that becomes true, I think we'll always, as an industry, be stuck with the label of being rent-seeking and being one that's generally not so positive for society. All right, that ends my comment for today, and I guess opening myself to questions.
Jason, thank you so much. That was the most potent possible use of the 5, 6, or 7 minutes you just shared with us. I love that question. Will it be our legacy to turn the next generation coming through after us into disillusioned and cynical people? I really get what you're saying, Jason. I honestly think there are many people who join the financial services sector with an inherently good set of values. There've been people who've been brought up well, they've maybe been educated well, come from good backgrounds, good families, etc. And absolutely nothing wrong with them when they join the sector. But over a period of time, there's a predisposition within the industry to actually drive the good out of them and replace that goodness with a sense of an angry kind of competition, not a nice, healthy, competitive spirit, but an angry kind of me first mindset. And that's the point I believe you're making with this idea that will it be our legacy that we are creating the next generation to be disillusioned and cynical? Powerful stuff, Mr. Su. Powerful stuff indeed. We've got time for Q&A, and I think there are at least 1 or 2 people who want to raise points here. So, wow, you've really lit things up, Jason. So we're going to go to Daryl, because I know Daryl had a question or a point he wanted to make before the break. Then we're going to go to Ben, I think it was next. Daryl, back to you.
Thank you, Andy. Two points, Jason. I really liked that. The first one is it's extremely demotivating for an organisation that is not following its stated values. I've seen that in an investment bank where they have, you know, respect and different things, and obviously when the organisation is not promoting it, it's actually quite distressing to the employees. And a second one is I actually have a real experience. I was on a train listening to two young women talking, and this lady was being a bit loud, but it really made me think. She was working in customer services, and she was complaining that she hated her job because her job had a commission element based on upselling, and it wasn't stated in her actual job, although this had just been put in. And she eventually left because all she wanted to do was do her job, but the management were being very difficult because she wasn't seen to be selling when her role was actually just on a support role. So she actually became disillusioned and left the company because her role wasn't authentic. She was like a secret salesperson. It didn't align to what she was expecting, which is a bit similar to what you were saying there as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Daryl. Thank you. We're going to squeeze in maybe one or two very quick comments or questions. Let me go to gallery view. Alan Rayner, spend 5 seconds introducing yourself. You've not yet had a chance to do that, and then go straight to your point, but please be succinct. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm a naturalist, and I have a rather different view of the evolutionary process from that which is usually promulgated. And when we're looking at cynicism and how it arises, I think we need look no further than our dislocation from the natural world and a misconception of how we naturally are in the world as it naturally is. The point about moral DNA struck me violently because I am a naturalist and I know about the way evolution is perceived. And think about the moral difficulties associated with a misconception of the evolutionary process as epitomized by the notion of the selfish gene. I'm sure you've all heard of the selfish gene and the notion that arises from it. And that is a cause of enormous damage to our social and psychological and environmental welfare. It's a product of philosophical dualism, which started with Aristotle actually, and objectivistic science, which detaches us from immersion in the natural world. And I'm passionately keen to put forward a new and deeper understanding of our natural inclusion as human beings within the natural world and how that can change us from a set of values that are dishonest, unreasonable, and unkind to values which are honest, reasonable, and kind. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. I wanted to keep you really short, but it was so good I had to let it go. We're going to go to very quickly to Kim, then we're going to go to our next speaker, Prabhu. Kim, nice and quickly, please. Thank you.
Hi there. Thanks, Jason. My background is over 20 years in working in total rewards, both in consulting and in-house, before starting this Time for Change London. And you know, I agree completely with what you're saying. We need to motivate our young people. We need not to make them disillusioned and cynical people, but incentives drive the behaviors, right? So for years, that's what I've been really focused on in my work in total rewards, is that fairness issue. And thank you for your comments.
I'm going to pick up on that point because you make such a wonderful point. And for a couple of reasons, I'm going to quote Jason from the interview we had with Debbie. Jason said, I think I've got this word perfect, Jason. We must take the incentive to do the wrong thing off the table. I'm going to repeat that. We must take the incentive to do the wrong thing off the table. I'm going to say it one more time.
Hear, hear.
We must take the incentive to do the wrong thing off the table. Jason, thank you very much indeed. Everybody, let's be six for a few seconds. Let's go for it. Thank you very much, Jason. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. We're going to go straight to Prabhu. I'm upping the pace because we're a little bit short of time. Prabhu is a very well-respected member of the Transparency Task Force. Prabhu, over to you, sir. Please, 10 minutes or less. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
You've started me off, Andy, on exactly the right question. Why is it that we have the wrong incentives on the table? And it's that question that I'd like to address myself to. And I think the reason why we have the wrong incentives on the table is because we have shifted from being a society that is relational to being a society that is driven by money. And actually, there's a huge amount of research that's been done on this. And I want to introduce some of that research to you. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Let me just turn to that and go to screen share. Just 1 second. Now, for some reason, I seem not to be able to do that right now. Oh, here we are. There we go. I don't know if you can see these books, but these books are examples of the kind of research that's being done, looking at a whole range of things. So I want to start on the top right, if I may, a book titled The Relational Lens. None of this is by me, by the way, so I'm not pushing my own stuff, okay? The Relational Lens is a book that tells you how you can understand, manage, and measure relationships in your company. And this goes, of course, not just for companies, it goes for organizations, it goes for football clubs, it goes for churches, mosques, or whatever else, your neighborhood groups, it goes for every organization. In other words, we can measure relationships, and by measuring relationships, we can tell which of our relationships is working, and more important, why it's working. So you can measure your relationship with your investors, with your customers, with your staff, obviously internally, with the government, with the communities you serve, everything. This comes out of thinking that is there more on the left, the books and so on that you can see on the left. You can see the Jubilee roadmap down on the bottom right, which actually sets out a roadmap for how we can get to a relationship-driven future. So there's a whole load of literature here. Obviously, I don't have time to talk about all that, just so that you're aware of it. You can have these slides later, and so you will have access to all the titles if you wish. But I want to start, if I may, at the beginning, and to just get a bit of structured thought around this. Relational thinking means we actually have to change our minds. Look at the world not through the money lens, the sort of thing that Jason Sue was talking about, but see the world through a relational lens. Why do that? Because relationships are actually fundamental to us. If you had all the money in the world, but no relationships, you die very rich and very lonely. And most of us don't have the option of being very rich. We might be comfortable, we might be very comfortable, but most of us won't have the option of being very rich. But we do have the consequence of our lifestyle that many of us will end up being lonely old men and women. So if relationships are so fundamental to our well-being, why do we keep forgetting them in our strivings? Wouldn't it be better off if we looked at all that we do through a lens that focused on the implications of what we do for our relationships? And the argument is basically that we can do that, not just in our personal life, we can do this in our organizational life. Can we look at the whole issue of what is happening to COVID at the moment through the relational lens rather than just the biological lens, or just the money lens, or just the political lens? What about executive pay? This has already been raised. Can we look at the issue of executive pay relationally? Extremist action, terrorism, discontent, and so on. Can we look at all these not simply politically or financially or whatever? Can we look at them relationally? What would happen if we really did that? If we really did that as individuals, our goals would change, our values would change, our practices at work and in our personal lives would change. But not just for us individually, they would change for organizations. Indeed, they would change for nations. And the argument being put forward here is that they should and they can, and it's practical for us to move in that direction. Why? Because if we get relationships right, then the economic, social, environmental, political, and other consequences are likely to sort themselves out. This is an argument that has been now developed in all kinds of areas. So this is not just an idea. There's research behind it. There's 40 years of effort behind it. And you can look at the whole issue of a relational lifestyle personally, but you can also look at the debates going on in our education system, and you can say, could we have an education system that's relational? You can look at pensions. Not all of us are of pension age, but all of us are going to be, God willing, all of us are going to be of pension age. What about relational pensions? We talk about human rights, but is it right to talk about human rights? Should we not be talking about relational rights? We talked about the environment. Yes, the environment is very important. What should be our relationship to the environment? Can we measure it? We're measuring it at the moment through chemical means, you know, how much carbon and so on, but we could measure it relationally. And there's a whole range of organizations that has been already set up following this kind of philosophy, this kind of approach, this kind of value, whatever word you want to use. So there are initiatives in the areas of schools, in the areas of analytics, measuring them for companies and organizations, international relations through Concordis and through the relationship peacekeeping foundation, etc. There's a whole range of initiatives that has already started. So I'm not talking theory, I'm not talking research. Yes, there is theory, yes, there is research, but there are practical initiatives that you can find out about and you can get involved in and you can benefit from, and you can start new initiatives. It's all, you know, open space. So I come to the important point back again of measuring, influencing, and managing relationships at work. There is a way of doing that, and the way is set out in the book, The Relational Lens. Anybody can use it, but if you don't want to go to the trouble of working it all out yourself, there is an organization called Relational Analytics, and that organization is in the business of providing that service commercially. That is an organization that is 70% owned by an NGO, so the profits go 70% to an NGO and only 30% to the people who've invested the money in making the whole system a commercial success. What does that system consist in? It consists in the following: 5 different dimensions are measured, and you've got them there. You'll get the slides so you can look at it, but it looks at things like, are our values aligned? We were talking about how it is that the younger generation might grow up cynical, and the reason they would grow up cynical is because the values are not actually aligned. So that's on the top left, and then on the top right, what is our sense of belonging? And of course, these things are things, as I say, that can be measured in each of these dimensions and at different depths. What about transparency in the organization? How transparent is it? What about communication? And so on. So what is the level of participation? How is power being used in the organization? These things can all be measured. The 5 values that are being measured are on the right, and the more detailed, as it were, is in the polygon on the left. So a lot of the values that people talk about, and we've heard many different people talk about many different values, are in this chart on the center. And the question is, can we actually operationalize these values? And the whole point of this chart is to say, there's a way of understanding these values and operationalizing them so that they can be practical things, driving our organizations, driving improvement, from product development to customer relations, to employee relations, to environmental improvement and stewardship and all the rest of it. So that is the name of the organization, Relational Analytics, that does the measurement. But as I say, you do not have to go to them because the philosophy and so on is put out there, and you can develop your own metrics on the basis of that if you wish to. And here again is the list of the titles and so on that I've mentioned. The most important of them are Transforming Capitalism from Within, which is the bottom right. It's in a color that doesn't stand out too well, but it is Transforming Capitalism from Within. If you want to be more radical, you can go to the book After Capitalism. Nice big striking cover there. And if you think this is all beyond me, I'm not interested in these big issues, I just want to be a better manager, there are books like The Relational Manager that you can go to, which will tell you how to be a more relational manager, even in the middle of a dysfunctional system, or it's not entirely dysfunctional, of course, largely dysfunctional system. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very, very much indeed. You've crammed decades of wisdom into just a few minutes for us, which we are all very grateful for. Thank you, Prabhu, very much indeed. We're going to go to, I'll just stop the screen share for a second. We're going to go to a Q&A or comments, responses to Prabhu's session. Please just raise your hand or wave at me if you wish to make a comment at this point. I think it looks like we might be good. Does anybody have anything? It's Mr. Steve Hubbard, then Debbie. Steve, to you. Nice and succinct, please, Steve. Thank you.
Absolutely. Just one thought about the word trust. How does trust come into relational work? I wonder if
trust
in just make a remark about that.
Sorry, yes. In relational thinking, trust is a consequence. And it's a consequence of getting everything else right. So if the relationship is right, then trust will happen. Obviously, there is an initial degree of trust because of which relationships can be built up. But that's only initial. If that initial trust is abused, then of course cynicism develops, disillusionment results, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But if everything else is done right, all the relationships are right, then trust develops and deepens. And that's what we want. We want a society where relationships are developing and trust is developing.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Steve.
Andy.
Thank you for the response as well. Let's go to Debbie. Debbie.
Steve, you were asking what I was thinking earlier in the chat, and I'm going, whoa. But let me just say, to link, I think, this piece on relational with where we are with regards to values and what I find in the finance sector, what I find fascinating on the relational piece is looking at our big system, where our money system doesn't actually include the archetype of Mother Earth. So how can we have a relationship with each other or with the natural world, to Alan's comment, if our money system doesn't include the archetype of what's given us birth and holds us and sustains us right now? So therein lies a real disconnect that we have to override when we're in the system, to your point, Jason, which is what you're getting at with regards to values. And I think the other element we need to look at in the system is what's our individual relationship with money? Because if we come into the system and we've got fears or whatever, and money's going to help those fears, then we've lost already the connection with what our true relationship could be at the holistic level. And we're back to feeding the ego and the relationship with self and self-interest, which then drives the types of behaviors that we can get. And our money system, unfortunately, can really drive that if we're not careful.
Yeah, so there is a relational approach to money. And if you're interested in that, you need to read the books. How much money should we print? There is a relational answer to that. What should the interest rate be? There is a relational answer to that. What should the inflation rate be? There is a relational answer to that. But obviously, I don't have time to go into all that because these are sophisticated economic discussions. But there is literature on it. So if you're interested in that question, please follow it up.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Guess what, folks? It's time to be six all over again. So go for it. And let's thank Prabhu for that wonderful presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, we're going to really up the pace now because it's the 1 minute round. So I'm a big fan of Radio 4. I'm going to share my screen just to remind everybody what the running order is for the Just a Minute round. So like the Radio 4 program, the idea is you squeeze as much as you want into the 1 minute, literally the 1 minute that you're allocated. The running order is going to be as follows: Kim, Steve, Jacqueline rather. Harry's not with us, I don't think. Then we go to Rebecca, then we go to Ben, then Anne-Marie, then Mr. David Masters, and we end with Alan Williams, which is perfect because we started with Alan Williams. As I said earlier, if it wasn't for Alan, I wouldn't even know about World Values Day. It might be that you wouldn't know about World Values Day because I wouldn't know about it, and we wouldn't be having this this exchange of ideas tonight. So we're going to go straight to Kim. Kim, please take yourself off mute. I'm literally timing it on my phone. Okay, so go for it, Kim. Over to you. Thank you.
Andy, I've never heard this on radio before. So can I go maybe second or third so I can hear what it is?
Of course you can.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. In which case, we're going to go to Mr. Steve Hubbard. We'll put you second to last, Kim. Steve Hubbard.
Okay, thanks.
You've got a whole minute to yourself.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. I mean, to me, one of the outstanding speakers, at least anyway, is Jason. I mean, I think that's a fantastic input, and his analysis is very powerful. I think the role of time is important. I wonder if Deborah Henderson has a view about people saying, I will do and behave the right thing, and I understand all this, but not yet, not quite today. It's a good idea, but I'm all for it, but not quite today. And the other thing I thought was the Mark Twain quote about the problem is not what people don't know or we don't know, it's what we do know. That ain't so in the Mark Twain phrase, because I think that comes into a lot of macroeconomics in that people think they know how it works, but in fact, I'm not sure at all that they do. So that's probably me the time up, Andy.
Well done. You did that with about 8 seconds left, Steve. That was absolutely perfect. Thank you very much, sir. We're going to go straight to Jacqueline Hill. Jacqueline, over to you.
Hello, thank you. I'd actually like to pose a question, which is acting in line with our values always a good thing? For example, one of my values is generosity. It's such a strong driver that it often leads me to prioritize the needs of others over my own, which can leave me feeling resentful. I also make value judgments about others when I see them being less, quote, generous than I think they should be. Then I leap on my high horse, claim the moral high ground, and become deaf and blind to their point of view, which doesn't make for great relationships. This World Values Day, we're being challenged to identify the values that drive us and then act on them. I'd like to add an intermediate step, which is to explore how your values help you in life and how they might get in your way. And this will enable you to be more discerning about how you act upon your values and how other people's values impact you. It can raise some significant questions and powerful insights, and I'll put a link to a guide to doing that in the chat box.
Jacqueline, that's got to be the best possible use of 54 seconds there's ever been. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to go straight to Rebecca. Rebecca Self, off you go. You've got a whole minute to yourself.
Thank you. So valuing the long term is important. Yet in the finance industry, we place a huge financial value on nanoseconds via high frequency trading. Now, why is this? Somehow culture, our values, instant gratification, profit motive, etc. What can we do about it? Well, there's a system called Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. There's also the Long Time Project, as well as a book called The Good Ancestor, which is looking through the lens of future generations and how we look through our values through those future generations. Also, we need courage to go into our banks, talk to our pension fund managers and ask them what they're doing with our money.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Rebecca, that was wonderful. Thank you very much, and well within the time allocated. We're going to go from a very, very Earth planet orientated point to somebody who I know who is very, very authentically on that very same wavelength. Mr. Ben Constable Maxwell, what are you going to share with us in your 1 minute, sir? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Nice introduction. Not sure how accurate, but so I think for me it's really a question of looking at this distinction between values and value, and it brings so much of this stuff together. I think there used to be this sort of dissonance between the two, and there's a view that they're at odds with each other inherently and inevitably. But I think that sort of goes to that discussion we had earlier about people who entered the financial services industry had almost their values beaten out of them by the search for value. I think there's a really interesting shift happening at the moment, which is that I think there is a real movement towards the value of values, and I think that's kind of having a resurgence. It's sort of like ethical investing evolved, but it's sort of moving towards impact investment. I think those people coming into our industry now have an opportunity to really focus on their values. And the final quick point is that actually I think if we start to redefine value, as you know, someone like Mariana Mazzucato has done, and thinking about value properly. And someone said earlier, I can't remember who it was, but really think about the real value of things, the true value of things, encompassing social and environmental factors. Then I think hopefully we move towards a situation where we're not actually having this dissonance between value and values. They can sort of merge together. So I'll stop there. I've gone slightly over.
Well, that's perfect. Really, really wonderful stuff. And I'm going to add a bit to what you just said. I personally think that commercial organizations that really understand that things like transparency, truthfulness, and trustworthiness are true commercial virtues, these are the organizations that will prosper in the future. These are the organizations that get the fact that there is value in values. Thank you very much indeed, Ben. We go straight to Anne-Marie Borg, who might be on mute.
Sorry, yeah, exactly. Thank you. What amazes me is that with all the speakers we've had tonight, there is such an overlap and common denominator. And I think that's what I wanted to talk about. Whatever values we're looking at, and I think we all agreed on a certain amount of them, definitely, they are mirrored in every sector of our society and each sector of our lives as well. The one that actually interests me the most is education. And I think that came up as well. How do we empower the younger generation to tackle change as it presents itself in their lives? What tools can we provide to enjoy learning and also to owning their education so that they feel responsible for it, enjoy it, and feel responsible? So my idea in that, in this commitment that I have, the values that I looked at was commitment regardless of disappointments, and there are quite a few. Humility, the ability to listen to other people's points of view without judging hastily, because we still always judge anyway, and recognizing when we make mistakes very honestly. Paying attention, attentive listening, verbal and non-verbal. Empathy, to feel with, not just to sympathize. And the openness to change. Creativity, imagination. And a big one for me is congruence. That's to always appear the way we really are and not have this disconnect between our persona, if you want, and who we truly are, our integrity. It's a difficult one because you've got to keep track of it all the time, because sometimes we like to appear maybe better, I don't know, more integrity that we maybe have. So it's yeah, keeping that in check. Voila.
Voila, Anne-Marie. I love the same on the outside as you are on the inside. I love that. Yeah. I really love that point, Anne-Marie. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Mr. David Masters, what are you going to say in your minute? That's the question.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Andy, and everybody for putting on an excellent event. We mentioned the Co-op Bank earlier. Co-op Bank is a client of mine. I think they are a textbook example of what happens when a business, in particular the senior management of that business and the owners of that business, or the people conducting the ownership of that business, become utterly divorced from the values that the business espouses. Onto some of what Jason said, I agree with a lot of what you said, both when you were talking and also in the chat afterwards. I think the myth of wealth creation within the investment industry is something that's been long punctured. The truth is you don't get into the Sunday Times rich list by investing in other people's mutual funds. You might get into the Sunday Times rich list by other people investing in you, or by setting up your own mutual funds. And obviously impact investing, ESG in all its forms, is a great opportunity for the industry to change that dialogue.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Great inputs. I love that line. You'll never get into the rich list by investing in other people's mutual funds. That's pretty cool. Thank you, David, very, very much indeed. Interesting that Co-op's a client of yours. I'm sure they are benefiting from your wise guidance and counsel, David, in relation to their brand. I hope they are.
Another conversation, isn't it?
Okay. We're now going to go to Kim, who now does know what we mean by Radio 4's Just a Minute Round.
Thank you very much. I'm embarrassed to admit I've lived here for 10 years and didn't know what that was. Yeah, just getting back to what David just said in terms of leaders becoming divorced from values. I thought that was very poignant. And Anne-Marie, talking about how do we empower the younger generation to change. And I think that to do that, we really need to provide them with a workplace that they can be proud of. Peter mentioned the end justifies the means. If our actions are not based on the right values, then we get what we get, right? And this is what seems to be happening. And finally, Prabhu said, you know, why is it that we have the wrong values on the table? And that's a really good question. I mean, I've worked with Total Rewards for over 20 years, and I've asked myself that for as long. I've been lucky to be in a position to influence some of that. But seriously, especially in the executive compensation space, when will it change? And I know we have people looking out there at looking at different ways, incorporating ESG into that space, but I think we need to do more.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's great that this incentives point keeps coming back time and time again. There's that pretty famous quote, Charlie Munger. I think the words were, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Yeah, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. There's a lifetime's wisdom in that one simple sentence, Kim. Perfect. We now go to Alan Williams. And as I said at the very beginning, it's very fitting that we're ending with Alan, because it was Alan's inspiration that got me to know about World Values Day, as a consequence to get to know about Charles and others. This is an important movement, folks. World Values Day is a movement. It's an opportunity for mankind, womankind, the human race to reconnect with values and actually take a day in the year to think about them. But let's not make the mistake of only thinking about values on the one day of the year. Let's remind ourselves that we might have made a commitment at the beginning of the session to be a little bit more thoughtful about one value that really matters to us. For me personally, it is tolerance. I want to be more tolerant than I am, and I'm going to make an effort to be mindful of that between now and next year's World Values Day. I now would like to invite Alan to kind of finish off the formal part of our session. Alan, if you'd like to take 2 or 3 minutes, that's fine. We are going to be finishing at about 1:15, folks, and I know Alan's got so much to share that I'll be grateful if you would be happy to spend a minute or 2 or 3 sharing what he'd like to share as we draw this session to a close. Mr. Alan Williams, thank you so much. It's you that made this happen. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for the warning of speaking for longer than 1 minute. So first thing to say, I guess, is just thank you so much, everybody, for taking part in this. You know, if anybody had asked me before, how many people do you think are going to show up, and how much are they really going to show up when they're connected with the FS sector, I would have been pretty skeptical. And so thank you for giving me some new faith in this sector. And if we can do it in this sector, we can do it in any sector. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I'd like to suggest a reason why values are more important now and going forward than they have ever been before. And I believe that this is a combination of just 3 influences. The first one is choice. People are making choices on a different basis now than they were, say, 10 years ago. It used to be more rational, more based on finance. Now, decisions are made on a deeper, more emotional, values basis. That's the first one. The second is communication. Social media and the internet has been a game changer for communication. We can communicate what we think and what we believe and what we feel in a nanosecond to millions of people. That never happened before. And the final one is control. It used to be that organizations owned their brand. You know, they would invest in a marketing campaign, advertising campaign, PR campaign, and that would pump out the message to tell people what the organization is all about. That's no longer the case. Because of the communication piece, now it's what employees and customers and service partners and communities say that form the organization's reputation, not what they say. So in the future, and already now, organizations' brands are co-owned by the stakeholders. And it's really interesting to see that there's work now happening around the financial model following the model that is already in place for the reputation. So I call these three C to the power of 3, and they together form what I refer to as the values economy, which is already here and growing. But, and there's a but at the end, there's still a load more work to do, because although awareness is increasing, practice does not seem to be. And there's been a very recent piece of work by Donald Sull out of MIT Sloan with some colleagues who have shown that there is zero correlation between what organizations say their values are and what their employees believe is happening. And that's a sorry state of affairs. So we've got to get on, capitalize on the awareness and translate that into action. Thank you, Andy.
On the contrary, thank you very much indeed, Alan. You've capped the session off perfectly well. We've had some great speakers. This has been our first ever attempt to be involved with World Values Day. We were delighted to have had a chance to participate. It's lovely to know that this morning there were people in Australia doing this. It's gone through all over the world today. People have been reconnecting and taking the opportunity to connect with what matters to them and having conversations and dialogue about values. I've really enjoyed tonight's session. Thank you all very, very much indeed.